Now it's time for Transatlantic Talk.
Transatlantic Talk with Caroline Feraday.
Yeehaw, Caroline Feraday, how are you?
Oh, what are we yee-hawing about? You're
Well,
all jolly and I'm in America and we've got nothing to be happy about.
No. I mean, honestly, the news just becomes increasingly difficult to stomach, doesn't it, from there? Shall we start with this Philadelphia plane crash and just utter horror?
Yeah, well, so the Philadelphia plane crash comes quickly off the back of what happened in Washington, D.C. But this is a medivac, like moving a patient, in fact, moving a child patient, and all six that came down in Philadelphia. There's erupted into fire, and all six people on board. Obviously, all eyes are on the sky, particularly this week after what happened Wednesday night in Washington, D.C., as bodies are still being recovered from the Potomac River. It's actually a really unpleasant and difficult recovery effort there in D.C. They've got all this, it's very cold, and then they've got all this fog, so it's not easy for them to see. It's in the river. It's a very unpleasant, difficult, challenging task for them to recover either remains or bodies from that river, where all of the passengers on board that passenger flight from Wichita, Kansas, involved in that accident with the Black Hawk helicopter, died. I mean, just horrendous.
It is just horrendous, actually. And of course, the investigators have now recovered both of the black boxes, which in some small solace is some way towards solving the problem. There are a lot of unanswered questions here, aren't there? And of course, Washington, D.C. has very crowded airspace, military helicopters often in that airspace, along with commercial airliners. It seems extraordinary that something like this could happen in this day and age with the amount of technology on both aircraft.
I have a slightly different outlook, I think, after spending so long in a light aircraft over London in early on in my career.
Yes, of course, there's the flying eye.
But I always think people think that flying is this very technologically advanced thing, but actually it's quite basic, and not particularly fancy, I think. And a lot of it is, do you see that plane? Can you see that over there? And that does seem to be, this was something that happened visually or didn't happen visually, for these two aircraft, without preempting the investigation, where they obviously did not see each other, and that happened. It's fairly standard. I mean, to use a river, and I've flown in a helicopter across the Heathrow flight path, which is a much busier airport, I should say. So it is a busy airspace, yes, but it is not unusual for that to be the pattern that is happening there.
No, absolutely.
So there's that, and then obviously lots of questions. Changes at the top of the people responsible for air traffic controllers in recent times. So lots of kind of eyes there. From the White House, there's been a lot of blame on DEI policies and people questioning how at this point you could possibly draw that conclusion.
Can I just go back? Let's just unpick that a bit. Let's just go back to air traffic control. Last night when I went to bed, there were lots of questions about whether it was under-resourced and whether the air traffic controllers themselves were actually stretched too thinly, and they were dealing not only with that commercial jet, but dealing with the helicopter as well. And those should be two distinct roles.
Yeah, essentially they were. It was, I think that the phrase they've used is not normal staffing, but overall they are understaffed. And that has been the case for some time. And then also in the mix of that is a lot of questions about what happened since January the 20th in terms of federal staff and federal staffing. The head of the FAA, who are responsible, essentially resigned his post, but was asked to do so. So there've been changes in that field as well. So yes, would were they understaffed? And that is clearly a line of questioning for investigators.
So let's move on to what Trump said. I mean, I think it was pretty inflammatory what he said. He blamed diversity initiatives at the FAA for the deadly crash that occurred. He started talking about diversity and inclusion, and you can have your own thoughts on all of that. He talked about those people with disabilities being hired over and above people who might be more competent for those jobs. I thought, even if that is true, I felt it was distasteful to bring it up at that moment.
Well, there's no evidence to suggest that any of the people who may or may not be responsible for the accident that happened in Washington were in any way DEI hires, right? And then also his spokesperson went a step further, Caroline Levitt, she's called, and when she was questioned about, hey, where's he drawing this conclusion for? What evidence he got? She said, well, he's drawing it from facts. So we never got to find out what these facts were. But she then went on to say, and I'm slightly paraphrasing because I haven't got the exact quote in front of me, but basically it was, well, when you're flying in a plane, all you care about is whether or not it flies safely. You don't care whether or not your aircraft has a black or brown pilot. And so I think it's a reasonable lens to see that as a very offensive, inflammatory, divisive comment to try and blame an air crash either on disabled people or people of colour.
Well, I think also the fact is, and you're right about this, what you need is the facts in front of you before you leap to conclusions about any of this, and that is the one thing he doesn't have. When he was actually asked by a reporter why he felt it was DEI initiatives that were to blame for all of this, he had a bizarre response. He says, because I have common sense. I mean, how is that playing in the States, that kind of comment?
I think, like, it's all been coming so fast in the last week in the States, and people are aware of the kind of personality that Donald Trump is. But there has been extreme offence and pushback against the remarks that have been made at a time when this would be an opportunity for Donald Trump to offer condolences, to reassure people about safety when they're flying.
And I think that's something that's
needed.
Clearly is of paramount importance, isn't it, for those people who are taking flights?
And he almost made light of it. He said, what do you want? You know, he said, are you going to visit the site? He said, what do you want me to do? Go swimming? I mean, it's really very offensive. People have lost their family members. A lot of people were young people coming back from a figure skating championship in Wichita, Kansas. It is each and every single person on that plane had you know, people who love them and people who are just absolutely devastated. So to make light of it and to jump forward in the conclusions of what happened, I think is something that people have been quite shocked by. Are you shocked that it came from Donald Trump? No.
No. I mean, shock and awe, that's his mantra, I suppose. Just going back to the Philadelphia plane crash, again, this is a very strange plane crash, a Learjet 55. Do we know any more detail about this?
No, it does sound at this stage, and again, I can't preempt it, the information that's coming out sounds like that is the only aircraft involved in that collision. And I suspect it's something that may not have the attention that it would have had it not been for the much bigger air crash in Washington, because of course now there's focus on safety in our skies and flying and air safety, and people are on edge, and really that's what I'm saying about leadership is you know, this is a time where people need reassurance and not to have, you know, further undermining of whether or not we're safe. You know, you want to be reassured and told we're going to do everything within our powers to make sure that flying is safe, that when you take off, you get where you're supposed to be. And you know, that is a really important factor, and not blaming or trying to politicise what has happened.
Yeah. I'm very mindful of the fact that the takeoff and landing are the most dangerous parts of any plane journey. I've always thought that. And of course, that has been borne out. It remains to be seen what we uncover, particularly from those black boxes. Has anything fun happened in the States? I mean, obviously, wildfires. Where are we with the wildfires? That's gone off the radar of the British press.
We had a Fire Aid concert, actually. So all the music stars came out and they did a big fundraiser last night in Los Angeles. Went on, you know, as everyone from Billie Eilish to Stevie Wonder, Stephen Stills, you know, to Rod Stewart, to Lady Gaga, to Pink. And they did it at 2 stadiums and kind of simultaneously went between the two, raised a lot of money for victims who've lost their homes. I mean, thousands of people have lost their homes. They're just about this weekend to open up the roads to the Pacific Palisades. And I mean, I drove down there 2 weeks ago, probably now it is, or nearly 2 weeks ago. And it's a very exposed situation. And I think the concern from a lot of the people whose homes are still standing or are not standing is about whether or not the security is there for those people. But my goodness, just to have all of your belongings just trashed and in the street like that is something. Anyway, it'll help them a bit with getting their insurance and assessed and all that rebuilding
well,
stuff.
Let's hope. Let's talk about my favourite couple, Harry and Meghan, and this launch. You know, like all the channels, they always do a launch of all the upcoming programming, and of course, Harry and Meghan were the butt of a joke, weren't they?
So this was Netflix. Of course, have given Harry and Meghan quite a bit of money for their documentary, and then the Polo series that didn't really do very much, and then Meghan's got her, I don't know where she wants to be, like the new Nigella or something, you know, the homey one that's now been delayed.
With Love Meghan, it's called. With Love.
Yeah, Meghan Loves Meghan, or whatever it's called.
Meghan does love Meghan.
Anyway, so they're at this part. So they're not at this party, but John Mulaney is there, who's a comedian, and he makes a few jokes about his new chat show, which he's launching, which is like a live chat show. And he said, well, it's a really fun experiment. Not since Harry and Meghan has Netflix given more money to someone without a specific plan. And this is in front of all of the Netflix bigwigs and all of these industry people. So, yeah, and that comes off the back, of course, of quite a negative piece by Vanity Fair. So, yeah, it's not exactly great news.
I mean, I would have loved to watch Bella Bajaria's face. She's the chief content officer of Netflix when that joke was being made. You're right. Now, the Vanity Fair piece, it was an 8,000-word piece suggesting that the couple, well, let's just say, didn't have any credible ideas. I mean, it's worse than that. Didn't they pitch something? Harry pitched a programme idea about interviewing psychopaths.
Yeah, listen, if you, before you get married, don't have great content ideas, there's nothing in the act of getting married that is going to suddenly turn you into a great content maker, no matter how much you aspire to it or want to be it.
No, absolutely agreed. And of course, if you remember from Spotify, Bill Simmons called them grifters. This was after their $20 million deal with the company ended prematurely in 2023. I think the most notable thing about this Netflix launch was no mention of Harry and Meghan. That's got to hurt.
Yeah, and that series has been put back. And you mentioned the Spotify, the grifters remark. I mean, they were supposed to do this whole podcast series and they just didn't produce them. This is the thing, I think, with all podcasts. People think, oh, we'll do a podcast. And most people don't get past 2. And actually, the hard work of podcasting is continually putting it out and getting the content in there. And it isn't that simple.
No, it really
And also,
isn't.
I think they want to reinvent the wheel as opposed to just putting content out there. I think that makes sense.
Well, I think one of the other problems.
They want it to be huge.
But they want it to be about them, and the attention span to their lifestyle is only so finite, isn't it?
Yes, but also like Harry's ideas. So this is me really unpicking it now. Harry's ideas are like, I'm going to interview this really big famous person, and Meghan's interviews tend to be getting really big famous people, but then getting them to listen to her talk about herself. Right? That is the general pitch.
Oh, you're harsh.
And no. But what I find most fascinating in this job and in your job isn't the famous people. It is the people who've got real stories to tell,
100%.
who have overcome adversity, who are thrust into situations, who have to kind of find a part of themselves that they didn't know existed, and exploring, hearing about that and hearing those stories of kind of overcoming things or courage or whatever it might be. Famous people are boring. Real people are really interesting, and it would be wonderful if they decided that those were the people that they wanted to feature.
No,
But
you've just really tickled me, the idea that Meghan wants to interview people so she can talk about herself. I think that's the quote of the day, actually, Caroline. Well done. Very
That's enough
good.
about me. What do you think about me?
Absolutely. Caroline, thanks ever so much. That's Caroline Feraday over there in the United States. That was today's Transatlantic Talk.